Welcome to Black Mental Health Live. My name is Natan Medina, and I'll be your host for this evening. Over the next few hours or so, we'll be exploring mental health and the Black experience through 4 key themes: lived experience, getting help, understanding your rights, and careers in mental health. We'll be hearing from a range of people, from those who have had personal experiences of struggling with their mental health to people working in the healthcare system. And just to be clear, everyone in the studio is following COVID guidelines of wearing PPE and keeping social distancing. We also want to hear from you. If you have any questions for our speakers and guests, then please send them to us using the question box below this video. Or you can tweet using the hashtag BMHlive. We'll aim to respond to as many as we can. With me in the studio are Adelaide Chimbanda, nurse consultant at Sheffield Health and Social Care, NHS Trust, and trustee of local mental health charity Sheffield Flourish, and Ursula Myrie, managing director of Adira, a survivor-led organization supporting Black people and their mental well-being. Ursula also has had her own lived experiences of struggling with her mental health, which we'll hear about later on. But before we dive into our first theme, I wonder if you wanted to briefly tell us why this subject and this event is so important, Adelaide.
Okay, so I'm very passionate about mental health. I think I've been in mental health services for over 20 years now. I also clearly am a Black woman. I've got Black children, I've got Black family, Black friends, and it's an area that I think we are needing a lot of support, understanding and I think, in my work as a mental health nurse, I have found that there's a lot of disparities in terms of the experiences that Black people have. And I think it's something that from secondary mental health services working for the NHS, we absolutely need to be engaging with the community. So having an opportunity to come onto a platform such as this, obviously led by Adira, I think it's really, really important for us to connect with the issues, for us to share what we're about and what we're trying to do, but also, have some real talk about Black people's experiences in mental health. I think as a trustee of Sheffield Flourish, it's opened up my eyes to the voluntary sector and how they work, and actually made me realize that as secondary mental health services, we think we're it, that we do it all, that we are the beginning and the end of mental health, and actually we are only but a drop in the ocean. I find that in the voluntary sector, there is a lot of work going on.
Unnoticed as well.
Unnoticed, without structure, without funding. And I think, the work that Sheffield Flourish does to sort of try and bridge the gap and provide a platform that people can access through the mental health guide for people to go and see, I guess, what services are out there beyond the secondary mental health services, so your inpatients, your community mental health teams, and get to know people like Ursula and her organization. I think if we start to tap into that a little bit more, we will probably find that we achieve a lot more together than separate. And as for Adira, I mean, you will hear Ursula speak. She's a phenomenal woman. She's got a phenomenal story. And I think for women in Sheffield, if you want to go and be real and talk about your truth and the issues that concern us as Black women, I suggest you go and you find Adira, spend some time with them, and you realize that actually, we've got a story to tell, and there's a platform for us to be able to tell it. So I'm a Black woman. I'm a mental health nurse. I'm a citizen of Sheffield, and I think this is important.
Thank you so much, Adelaide. And could I extend the question to you as well, Ursula? Why do you think that this subject and this event is so important?
I think this is something I do every single year. I put on an event like this every year, specifically for the Black community. Adira is a survivor-led mental health organization, and Adira is a Hebrew word. It means strong, dignified, and powerful, because that's what we're trying to empower our community to become. And mental health is incredibly taboo in the black community. It always has been, and I'm hoping now with the younger generation that we're changing that shift, because I call them the talking generation, so they're the ones that are willing to talk about it. But from now, I still feel like we need to keep having the conversations, need to keep making it public, need to let the black community know it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to have mental health issues. It doesn't mean that you're mad or you're stupid or you're idiot or you're fool or somebody has juju you, put black magic on you, voodoo you, witchcraft you. All the things that we say, you know, is associated, the stigmas attached to mental health. So for me, it's really important as a black woman with lived experience of mental health issues who was told all my life that my mental health issues were demonic possession. And I believed that until I received a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, didn't know what that was, went home, Googled it, and it was tick, tick. Yep, that's me, that's me, that's me. I behave like that. And because I had a diagnosis, I was able to say, okay, now that I know what's wrong, I know how to fix it. And now that I know that it's not demonic possession, that means that half my family, if not more, have mental health issues. Yeah. They're not mad or the black sheep. It is mental health issues. And I want to use this platform to let black people know it's okay to talk about mental health. It's okay to say, I'm struggling, I'm not okay. And Adira was created to be a beacon, that safe space where black people could come and see another black person who looks like them from an organization that's black-led, black-owned. Everybody there is black and understands you. We understand culture, we understand religion, we understand faith, we understand your beliefs because we are you. And it was important for me to create a space where black people could come, and if they want to talk Jamaican, I'm tired and I'm fed up, you know, or if they want to be African, hey, do you see that man? He there, job me, this is the space. Come and do it here. They have a voice.
The language, we understand the language
exactly.
As well.
It's about the language, you know. No matter how many different languages they are, one thing that is universal in every language, Ghanaian, Nigerian, Jamaican, we all understand.
We all understand exactly, and it just and for that it allows people to just express themselves more openly.
More openly, because you're surrounded by people who look like you and understand you.
Exactly, thank you. And hopefully we'll be unpicking some of these challenges through this event and any follow-up. So, let's get started with our first theme. Let's hear about the experiences of people who have struggled with their mental health.
My name is Abdi Kareem, and I've lived in Sheffield most of my life. I started getting social anxiety back when I was in school, and I found it harder and harder to attend each day. And it carried on, and it affected me it affected me a lot. And it continued till when I still went to uni. I went to uni at Manchester, and I was suffering panic attacks. When it was because it was a different place, I wasn't comfortable. I was out of place basically. Social anxiety is for me is what people think of as a normal activity. It's 10 times harder. It's you get your body, it reacts in the body. You get it really affects. It makes it troublesome. It makes it just a painful experience to do that task. So if I were to, for example, I'm going like a different city where I'm not comfortable with, I'd feel like I'd be feeling like to vomit up. I'd feel sweaty. I'd feel just uncomfortable the whole time on the train, on speaking to people I don't know. I would not know what to say. I'd rather avoid it. I'd rather escape. I'd rather flee from the situation. I've gone and sought help, even though the wait times were long, because a lot of community was using service. I was thankfully able to get help, and in a form of through a counsellor, in a form of CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, which has helped a lot in my life. I first sought support with the help of my aunt. I wasn't even able to go by myself. I had to get my aunt to help me, to give me the first push. And she helped me, she attended with me, and to book up the appointment. So the next time I went by myself. I was able to get through it, and the counsellor recommended different ways to help me. One of them was a stress course that will teach you about stress and stuff, the effects on the body and stuff like that. Months later, like nearly a year, I was able to, after recommending CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, I started doing that with my therapist, and it brought me out of the cage I had myself in. I wasn't able to leave the house for so long. I could count the number of times I left my home with one hand in a year. So just the little steps she got me to do, it brought me back into society, and back to the shops, back to events, back to education. It just brought me back out. She taught me the effects of what social anxiety does to the person. She taught me what I could do to help myself. She gave me the tools, basically, to step by step make a plan for myself, even without going to CBT weekly. I could do it myself. I could make a task for myself. I could go to a shop. I could go to outside, just one step at a time, and it brought me out, and I continue to do it, and I've grown to where I can do other stuff where I wasn't able to imagine before. I do, sometimes it falls back. I go back to my routine, but just having the tools and the knowledge, it's basically, you can use it to go back. You can do the exact same thing. You can do one event at a time. You can go to a social event. You can try one step at a time. You can go like volunteering. You try a little bit. Just go and basically put in the effort to. If you know something, that if you take like one action in a week or two, it's all you need. It's basically one step at a time. Is what I say. When I withdrew from university because of the social anxiety getting the better of myself and shut me out completely, I was at the lowest point. I didn't think my life would get better. I thought I'd stay like this for most of my life. It troubled me. I don't think it was going to get better, but it showed me to aim higher than I was even expecting to. I thought I'd be able to do at least one little thing, but it made me to aim high myself when she gave me the tools to, plan ahead and prepare, basically, and look back at what I was feeling, my safety triggers or something like that, and my safety behaviors, and just drop them one bit at a time and come out my shell. This was the first year I went back to education straight away after doing CBT. I attended a course to get me ready to go back to uni, so I can actually achieve my goals the first time around while I was aiming. Social anxiety, I thought it crippled my life, and being able to go back at it with tools will make the effects of social anxiety go less and less. It's still there, but having the tools to combat it is what I really want to share with people that are in similar situations. I'd say reach out. Just the first step. If you do the first step, you don't know how far it can go. Don't expect all doom and gloom. Expect a different outcome for your life instead of just accepting how it is right now. Try and just the one step. If you do one step, I'm not guaranteed, but I hope that one step shows you that it can better your situation.
My name's Amina. I'm 32, and I'm one of the founding members of Adira, along with Ursula and Marjorie. And I'm just a born and bred Yorkshire. Well, not born, but been in Sheffield since I was a year old, so I like to think I was born and bred here. I guess I would describe my mental health journey as waves. Because I had a very typical happy childhood and was always just made to feel like a rock star, a bit of a superhero. And then when I got to about 18 and I was just thrown into adult world where I had to make adult medical decisions for myself. I chose to have surgery that caused me to have a stroke. So that was the first adult decision I really feel like I made, and it backfired in a major way. So it just went downhill from there with trusting myself and all that. I didn't really know that's what was happening at the time. I'd never heard of the phrase mental health, and I speak Somali and even a few words in Arabic, and I've never heard the phrase mental and health put together. So when I kind of developed all this anxiety, and I hid it very well, but while I was hiding it, it became very apparent to me and to other people that I would just collapse at certain times and just let everything out and vent at people that probably didn't deserve it. And I didn't know what to call that. That I feel like until mid-20s, I didn't know that I had mental health issues. I think that I didn't know what mental health was because I was hit with a big trauma at once, but I was taught that I was this rock star human being, and like the stroke disabled me from one side. I could not walk or talk, funnily enough, but I'm like, my brain's still a rock star, so I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm gonna beat this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. So when I fixed my physical self, there was a blockage to getting myself to admit that I had mental health issues. But I do think that my mom saw it before I did, and my siblings as well. But then I was living with epilepsy, and then I had this stroke, and I'm just thinking, oh, wow, you're just thriving here. But then they're seeing that I'm erratic and awake all night and sleeping all day and don't know no one. I dropped 11 stone in a year and got some of that back. But then I just had to go out and find the words for it, because they didn't know what it was. They just knew Summer in the milk ain't clean with this one, and we need to help her. And so I think that my main barrier was myself, but then my next barrier was trying to get someone to help me who I already knew. And so I would go to a doctor and I'd go, oh, okay, doc, I've got this and this and feeling I need to talk to someone. And they'd go to your epilepsy specialist. And then they'd go to your epilepsy nurse. And then she'd go, what am I supposed to do with your brain? I work with the medical side of your brain. Go get a psychiatrist. And I'm like, what? To who now? A psychiatrist? What am I gonna do with one of them? And because I didn't know what was wrong with me, I'm like, can you explain? Just someone, give me a clue. I think I found it myself. I did do therapy. I went to a therapist that specialized in people that had epilepsy and then developed mental health issues. I'm thinking, bang on. And she's gonna sort me right out. I got 12 sessions and I'm like, I'll have 8 left over. She's gonna tell me exactly what's wrong, and then I'm gonna go about my business. And I'm like, but it just went a little bit like, all right, so this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened, and obviously I did this and this and this. What am I supposed to do? How do I stop overcompensating for this one mistake? Because I would just do crazy stuff to prove that I could, And so this idea of being like, oh, but when I was a kid, I was so independent and I did this and I looked after this person and I was a good big sister and I was a good little sister. How can I keep that up, but without having to fake it? And she goes, how does that make you feel? I went, I wouldn't be here if it made me feel great now, would I? And then it was just asking me to go back over what took me 5 years to get to start with. And I swear, I don't think we got past the first 18 years of my life. And I'm like, 12 sessions are over, good, are you fixed? And I went, well, I tried. But then you'd say, I just want to learn to cook, which to everyone else is like a burden. But in a Somali household, the kitchen's the hub of your house. So me learning to cook and my mum not wanting to let me because I could have a seizure on the stove seems very logical to my mum. Seems very logical to the nice white lady that's my therapist. But to me, it's like it's a rite of passage. What do you mean? It's like telling me not to ever leave primary school to go to secondary school. Why do I have to miss out on it just because I have epilepsy? I wouldn't have let that happen before. And if anything, I carried more weight after those 12 sessions. Because she's just like, just don't do it, babe. It's amazing. I never grade from Pittsmore, so I went to, and I volunteered at the Advice Bureau, I volunteered at charity shops in Pittsmore, and all that came in were people with mental health issues. And it brought me to accept the fact that I had it, but it stopped me from feeling shame when I spoke about it. So I became one of those people you couldn't shut up and just sat there and I went, well, this is how you're living. Well, this happened to me and then I did this and then I did this and now half of my family think I'm out of my mind, but it's all right. Well, I'll get them back on side and it's gonna be all right because you know what? I'm not the only one. I'm still the only Somali person that I've ever met. But baby steps, I'll get them on side too. In my community, which I call myself Black, African, and Somali, but I predominantly was raised around East African people of all things. They praise somebody for living with a medical condition. So epilepsy, oh my God, you're a rock star. You have seizures. You fall about in Tesco and just shake it off and get up. But then you tell them that the idea of you feeling less than a sister that's 11 months younger than you or 2 years older than you, which I both have, I feel less than them because I can't do the simple tasks that they do. No, don't say that out loud, babe. You're not like those people that have mental illness. You're not like those that don't, put their pants on the right way or walk in a straight line, even when sober. And you're all right. You're just a bit left from center. And I've always been a bit left from center, I suppose. So it wasn't much different for a lot of people. So don't praise one and think of the other. I don't know how to put it. Don't dismiss the other and praise the medical condition because they're both horrible. And for me, you can't see epilepsy until I fall over and have a seizure in front of you. So how would you know that one's worse than the other?
Those were amazing stories from Abdi Hassan and Amina Ali. What's your thoughts on just how do you feel after seeing them?
I'm so proud of them, especially Abdi, because it's so difficult for a Black man to speak. We teach our black men from the womb to be strong black men, and you don't cry and you don't show weakness and you don't show pain. We teach them to stifle that side of their nature, so it's not easy for them to come forward and say, listen, I'm struggling or I've got a problem. And for Amina, as a Somali woman who's also a Muslim, which, you know, is the same in the Jamaican community, mental health for them is very taboo to speak out. I want it to be something where other people like them, other men, other Somali women will look at this and think, well, if she can speak out, if he can speak out, then it's okay for me.
Yeah, and she completely owns it, doesn't she?
She does.
So much confidence. And so
Yes.
does Abdi as well, you know. To have someone that not only talks about it openly but completely owns it just makes them so much more relatable and approachable.
Yeah.
And it shows people that you do have the support there.
Yeah.
You know, there's people that had to go through the hard route. They've gone through the hard way, and they've managed to find that support in order to help them.
That's right, but they've come back to help
to
those
help
who are
others.
behind them or who are coming now through that process.
Yeah, and extend that olive branch, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like you've been through a lot, obviously, with what you've been through. Would you be happy to share your story with us?
Yeah, I mean, I share my story at every opportunity because as painful as it is, and I'm very much aware of how painful my story is, I also have people who have come up to me and said, thank you for telling your story, because every time you tell your story, you tell my story. And I'm not at that place yet where I'm ready to tell my story. So you keep speaking, because every time you speak for me. I always tell people I wasn't born with mental health issues. Nobody is born with mental health issues. I have mental health issues because of trauma in my childhood, because of abuse in my childhood. I was born here in this country. I was sent to Jamaica when I was 2 to be raised by my sister's grandparents, where I suffered sexual abuse and rape at the hands of my sister's grandfather. I was beaten severely, verbally, mentally, emotionally, physically by her grandmother, because I wasn't their paternal or maternal, whatever the word is, grandchild, because we have different fathers. So it was when my mother came to Jamaica and saw how malnourished I was and how badly I was being treated, and there was obvious signs of sexual abuse and rape in a 6-year-old child that shouldn't have been there, and nobody was owning what had happened. So my mom saved up for a year and brought me from Jamaica to England. And as a 6-year-old, going through that trauma, because my sexual abuse started at the age of 2, right? And as a 6-year-old, you think, okay, I'm leaving this place of trauma and of pain, and I'm going somewhere where, you know, everything's going to be wonderful now, and everything's going to be fine now, and it's a brand new start. And it was a case of out of the frying pan and into the oven. Literally, because my mother was a sadistic, evil woman who, you know, was very well up in the church, Christian, religious woman who would go church 7 days a week and would drag us to the church. And aside from the physical abuse from her, the physical beatings to the point where she would break bones. I remember one day she hit me so hard, she split my head open, and I didn't even know my head had been split open. It was my sister who was screaming because there was just blood pouring, and my mom let my sister take me on the bus because she didn't want me to call an ambulance or anything like that. She let my sister take me on the bus to the hospital. And that's just one of many incidents. I was beaten with everything imaginable, from whips to telephone cords to pots to pans to hoover to broomsticks. And I know there'll be a lot of people watching this who will be able to relate to that.
Yeah.
That was my childhood. And on top of the physical beatings, she would constantly tell me every day, you're stupid, you're thick, you're worthless, you're useless, you're nothing, you're ugly, you're black. All the things that a mother should not say to her child. That's what I was told every day. And in between the beatings and the verbal abuse, she would allow the men in the church to come in the house and rape and abuse me. And she knew it was happening. She would actively schedule these men to come in the house because she always seemed to be conveniently out of the house when it was happening, and, you know, come back conveniently when it was finished. That was my childhood at home. And as a result of that, I started drinking when I was 9 years old. We had, you know, in Jamaican households, there's always alcohol. Always alcohol, because they're always got to bake a cake with alcohol in it. It's always got to have rum or vodka or something in that cake. Lord have mercy. And we learned from an early age that vodka and rum look like water. So we used to drink out the vodka and the rum and water it back down. So from 9, I started drinking to cope with what was happening at home. I started cutting when I was 7. I saw my first psychiatrist when I was 7 years old. That was my childhood from the age of 2 to 16. The rape and sexual abuse continued under the guise of religion. They're raping the demons out of me, or I was told that these men who are leaders in the church, they have needs, and it is my job to satisfy those needs. This is what my mother told me when I would complain about the rape and the abuse. So I spent a lot of my childhood running away from home. I would be taken to the police station. They would put me into care. That was my childhood between the age of 2 to 16. And then in between that, I was put into care for over 2 years under the care of Lambeth Council in London. And unbeknownst to me at the time, I think I was 9 when I first went into care, the care home was run by a paedophile ring. And so if you can imagine, I was put into care because I was being raped and abused at home, just to be put into a care home where they were raping, beating and drugging the hell out of us to keep us compliant. And we formed an organisation. When I say we, it was a black man in London who formed an organisation and decided to take on Lambeth Council, called the Shirley Oak Survivors. And it took us 3 years to hold Lambeth Council to account, but we fought and we won. And they publicly admitted that not only did they know that the care home was run by a paedophile ring, but they actively covered up what was going on in that care home. So I was being raped and abused at home, and I was being raped and abused in the care home. From Monday to Friday, I would be in the care home. They would send me home on weekends where I would be raped from Friday to Sunday. That was my childhood between that age and 16. Left home at 20, got married to a man who was very violent, beat me for 6 years through 2 pregnancies. When I told him that I wanted to leave the marriage, he tried to kill me. So police and social services had to move us out of Sheffield, out of London into Sheffield. That's how come we ended up here. And in between this, because I'm cutting this story down for time's sake, in between this, you're talking multiple breakdowns. I was sectioned multiple times. I learned to self-harm at a very early age. By the time I was 20, I was a full-blown alcoholic and in a domestic violence relationship and having to deal with the traumas of what happened to me in my childhood and been sectioned multiple times. And then when we moved here to Sheffield, within 2 weeks of us moving here, my youngest, who's an asthmatic, developed pneumonia. Now, if you imagine this, I've lost everything. Really I've lost my home, my car, my job, house, land, cat and dog. I've lost everything. I've been moved to a strange city. I'm a woman with serious mental health issues. I cannot do change. And I've been moved to a strange city. I can't tell anybody where I am. Within 2 weeks of living in a refuge with other women, my daughter is diagnosed with pneumonia and told that she has 24 hours to live. And if you have any friends or family, call them and tell them to come. I remember looking at this doctor like, are you mad? I've lost everything. I've got nothing left. If I call my friends and family and tell them where I am, they will tell the children's father. That was my life. We moved out of the refuge. We moved into the house we're in now. I kept having breakdowns until I was diagnosed at 33 with borderline personality disorder. And I didn't know what that was. Never heard of it. I went home, I Googled it, and I read it. Tick, yeah, that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you. Thank God. So I'm not demonic possessed. I'm not mad. I'm not the black sheep of the family. I have borderline personality disorder. I have PTSD. And it's not because I was born this way. It's because of the trauma in my childhood. It's because I was told constantly that I was...
managed to help you.
It really did manage to help me.
To empowered you as well to deal with these things.
And that's where the thing for Adira came from. When I realised that, okay, then if I'm not mad, if it's not mental health issues, then there are other people in my community who have the same problem, and there's something I can do about that. Yeah. One of the things people always say to me all the time is, Ursula, how does one person go through so much and still smile, still be happy? You still seem like, things don't affect you, things don't bother you. How did you come through so much trauma and you're still standing, you're still okay? And I say to people all that listen to me, this is what strength looks like. This is what power looks like. Exactly. This is what a survivor looks like. This is what a queen looks like. But understand something. Understand clearly. This is also what broken looks like. This is what messed up looks like. This is what damaged looks like. This is what a victim looks like. I tell people I'm a struggle wrapped in strength. Yeah, don't let what you see on the outside fool you. If somebody breaks their leg and they have a plaster cast on it, yeah, that leg is still broken. If that plaster cast is covered in diamonds and gold, it doesn't change the fact that underneath all that glitter, the leg is still broken. Understand that. So don't let what you see on the outside fool you. I want people to understand, because one of the things we never talk about is the other side of abuse. We talk about, oh, the abuse happened and it was years ago, and people think, I can't make it, I can't get through it. When I was in the refuge, that was the first time I tried to take my own life. I couldn't take it anymore. I sat with a knife to my throat. I was going to kill myself. It was the staff in the refuge that sat on the floor with me for 2 hours to talk me down. And I couldn't see 16 minutes, let alone 16. And now 16 years later, I go back to that refuge because I have a food pharmacy here in Sheffield what gives food to the vulnerable people. I go back to that refuge and I give food to those people who were there 16 years later. And I think sometimes when people, and I'm wrapping up. I think sometimes when people are in distress, one of the worst things, I'm not saying don't say this to somebody, but sometimes it can be
contradictive.
Yeah, to say to somebody, just take it one day at a time and you'll be fine. Because when I was in that pain with that knife to my throat, I couldn't see past the next day. I couldn't see past the next hour. So when people are in that situation and they say, look, I can't do another day. Don't tell me to take one day at a time. Okay, just take it get through the next few hours.
Yeah,
it's too hard, I can't do. Okay, just the next few minutes. I can't do that. Just the next few seconds. Okay, I'll tell you what. Just get to the next breath. Okay. Good? Okay, just the next breath. You don't need to make the next 16 minutes, just the next breath. Just get there and you'll be okay. Yeah. And I want to encourage anybody who's been through any kind of abuse, who thinks, I can't make it, I'm not going to make it, Ursula. I want to tell you, you have made it. The fact that you are sitting here watching this program today, those things that you thought was going to kill you, you made it. You are here and I am proud of you. Yeah. Keep fighting, keep going, keep pushing, because you have a community behind you
that supports you. Thank you, Ursula, for sharing your story. And it's such a testament to not just women, not just black people, but just anyone that's going through any type of abuse and doesn't know how to cope or how to struggle. If you have been affected by any of these stories you have heard so far, then there is help out there. Visit sheffieldmentalhealthguide.co.uk, a searchable directory of all mental health activities and support in Sheffield. Also, any questions for Ursula or any of our speakers and guests, then please send them to us through the question function on the website, or you can tweet with the hashtag BMHlive, and we'll aim to respond to as many as we can. We're going to have to say goodbye to Adelaide for now, but she will be back later to answer your questions. Thank you so much, Adelaide. It sounds to me that getting the right support at the right time can be instrumental in preventing mental health going into crisis, which nicely introduces our next theme about getting help. We have 3 speakers who will give an overview of some areas of mental health and the support that's available. Firstly, we can't have an event like today without making some reference to COVID-19 and the disproportionate impact on the black community it's had. I'd like to welcome Sheila Mudadi Billings to the studio. Sheila is a black counsellor working in Sheffield, improving access to psychological therapies, otherwise known as IAPT, and Mulberry practice working with asylum seekers and refugees. Welcome, Sheila.
Hi, Nathan. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
You're doing such a good job.
Isn't he, though?
We've actually been watching you in the back room, and I'm so glad that I agreed to do this today. I was quite nervous about this. I haven't been in front of a camera for years and years and years. I think it was 2012, the last time I did something like this. And Ursula, thank you so much for what you've just shared. Yeah. What you've just shared must have touched a lot of people out there, because what you've disclosed and shared has has gone to the heart of everybody.
Yeah, and it's
Thank
not
you
easy.
so much, and I'm hoping, you said you're a survivor. You're
Yeah.
not just a survivor, you are thriving.
Yes, I am.
When all those things happened to you, you were a victim. You became a survivor, and now you are thriving. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And it's just amazing to have both of you on today's show, sharing your stories and just giving your support, because it's going to extend out further than we can ever imagine.
Yeah.
Even if it just helps one person, that's a huge change it's going to have on a human life.
Absolutely, and that's why I agreed when Psycha phoned me and said, Sheila, would you like to take part? And Josie said, why are you doing this? Can you say something about it? I said, I'm actually doing it from a black woman. I'm a black woman,
Yeah.
and as a black woman, I want to support my community,
Yeah.
and I want to be helpful.
Exactly.
As simple as that,
Yeah.
and that's where I'm coming from.
Exactly.
Just to support and help my community as a black woman.
So with that in mind, I want to ask you, how has COVID-19 impacted on the grieving process?
Well, it has impacted immensely on the grieving process. What I'd like to say is loss and grief is a very sensitive and difficult subject, really. Especially now, we've lost so many lives in the UK. I'm just going to talk about the UK. We're touching over 45,000 people.
Yeah.
And I feel as if we are all grieving in one way or another ourselves. So COVID has added a complexity to the grieving process. It may even have suspended the grieving process. In that I mean, when people have been dying in hospital, loved ones have not been able to be there.
Exactly.
They have not been able to touch the bodies. People have died on their own. And maybe the lucky ones have had nurses, or maybe, I don't know, doctors actually showing the last moments on the screen. So that has been made it so unreal for loved ones. They can't believe that the loved ones have actually gone. So that has been so traumatic for people. And the process has been cut on its way. So trauma is there and the complexity is there. That's what COVID has done.
Yeah, it's really affected the community so badly.
Yeah, it's not just black community that's been affected. It's everybody. COVID has touched everybody.
Yeah.
Not just the black community.
Do you have any advice about when to seek help from someone who has experienced the loss of a loved one?
Well, it's really difficult because grief has as many reactions as there are people in this world. And usually when we've lost somebody, there's usually support from family and friends. From my own culture, when we lose somebody, family, friends, they come to the house of the deceased, and you actually hear a mile away people crying, screaming. When somebody has died, you know that there's a funeral at that house.
Exactly.
So that is the normal way of grieving. But because of what is happening with the COVID and sometimes there could be a stuckness in the grieving process.
Yeah.
So when that stuckness happens, people may need to seek support from professionals, from IAPT. You've mentioned IAPT. I work for IAPT. And also from maybe private therapists, or there's also crews an organization out there that's been offering support for many, many, many years. But unfortunately, the sad thing about these organizations is the waiting lists. There's huge waiting lists, long waiting lists for people to get, because the resources are so
Minimal.
Yes, minimal. That's your word, Nathan. Yes, because the demand is huge.
Exactly.
So when you say when to seek support, it doesn't matter. It could be 4 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years after the loss. It doesn't matter. And for me, actually, if there are no family or friends around to give someone support, if someone knocks on my door a month after they've experienced loss, I wouldn't turn that person away, to be quite honest, because they need support. You cannot turn someone away. So support is there. And then there's another organization that a colleague of mine, actually, I was reading through my emails this morning before I came here. There's another support, another agency that's just been opened apparently in Sheffield. I've just heard of it today, called Listen Ear, a South Yorkshire bereavement service, and they take self-referrals and referrals from other agencies like GPs or the primary care. So there's help out there for people to seek support, professional help.
There's so much help available, and it's so important that people understand that it's there, so that when they need it, especially in times of loss, they can access them.
Going back to what you said about stagnancy, can you share that story with us that you shared earlier? Because I feel like people relate to it more, about the old man whose wife had died and he was a Catholic and he wasn't able to...
Yes, I was saying about because of COVID, people haven't been able to actually go through the rituals that they would have done when their loved ones have passed away, or the ceremonies that they usually would have gone through. Like probably having ceremonies in church. The story I was telling you earlier with Nathan was that my colleague at work, she said when her grandmother passed away, her granddad, they've buried, or I think cremated, I'm not quite sure, her grandmom, who died, I think it was the end of March. That's when it happened. But they haven't been able to have the service in the church, the funeral, the actual funeral mass in church, which is so important for a granddad.
Exactly.
So for her granddad, he can't process his grieving.
So he's stuck where he is.
He's stuck where he is until that ceremony has happened for him. It's unfinished business. His wife cannot move on to the next part of her
It's exactly to that point that you said about the grieving process being suspended.
Absolutely. Until that ceremony has taken place. So he's really suffering, his mental health is suffering because of it. They don't know when that would take place. We're talking end of March, April, May, June. We are nearly end of July, 4 months. Usually, when normally before COVID happened, it would have happened within a month or within three. And then, in different cultures, they have different ceremonies. The people come together. They have the wake. They have, in the Jamaican...
we have 9 nights.
There you are. Yes.
9 nights, We celebrate 9 nights up to the burial.
Yes.
And, we come to the family's house and we get together with the community and we celebrate that person's life. And not being able to do that,
unfinished business again.
It's unfinished.
And then people are left with the guilt. They didn't do this for that person. They didn't do that for and then maybe even shame may come in. That they haven't been able to do what was necessary to do. They've just gone through the motions and they haven't been able, and some people have not even touched the body, because touching the body make it real that person has actually passed away. Without actually touching the body, you don't know. They can't believe that person has died, has gone. So it's very, very difficult.
It's like a void,
But I wanted to go back to what you said about families, that families, are important in the grieving process. But because I like to look at both sides of every coin. let's also remember that it's not the case for everybody.
Absolutely.
Some families, they
And
don't
friends.
have, let me put it, they don't have the tools.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've heard stories recently of young people who've lost a friend, and when they've gone to their parents, the parents have shooed them. Go away, he's passed away, what are you mourning for, he's dead. You know, and that young person is in pain. They're hurting, and they've gone to the one place where it's supposed to be a place of safety and, you know, comfort and come, let's talk about him and let's remember him but they're pushed
They don't
away.
have
So
that support.
sometimes
There's no
we are not
communication.
welcoming within our communities when it comes to grief, because we don't have the tools.
And that's why it's so important when they get into a place where they get to professionals, where they're given the space to actually talk about it as much as they want, and to grieve in their own unique individual
Yes.
way. That is so important. And there's no right or wrong in how to do it.
I wanted to ask you, Sheila, how important is confidentiality in the community?
Oh my goodness. We were talking about this earlier, weren't we? That in our community, everything is everyone's business.
Yeah.
Which sometimes I think it's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
Yeah.
Because life can be so lonely.
Yeah.
You can be suffering in a house or wherever you are with no one to talk to.
Yeah.
But living in a collective way, you can have someone to talk to. The image I remember the first time I went to Zimbabwe, because I was born in Zambia and my parents are from Zimbabwe. And my dad took us to his village, and to me it was absolutely fantastic. And the first time I went to the village, and in the morning, the women, they get up with all the young girls, buckets or whatever on their heads. You go to the river to get kutsime, kochera mvura, which means to kotera mvura, to get water from the river. And people are sharing. Women are actually sharing stories. You know what happened to me last night? I'm not feeling very well. Oh, don't worry, we're here to help you, whatever. So that actually lifts someone. You are sharing. But when you don't have anyone to share your troubles with, that's where the professionals come in. That's where we come in, the therapists. But confidentiality is uppermost. That's where you know that whatever you share in that room, it's not going to go anywhere. It's safe. You are free to say whatever you need to say, and your emotions are validated. They are normalized. You can say whatever you need to say. Nobody's going to judge you. To say, why have you said that? You shouldn't have said that. Like what you've just been saying, to shoo you away. Don't mention his name. Because sometimes when dad has passed away, mom may not want to even have him mentioned. But the children may want to talk about their dad. Or the sister of the man who's passed away may want to talk about his brother. But other members of the family don't.
really want to discuss
Exactly.
So they need that space where
they need that space where they can come and actually talk about it. A safe place without being judged.
But we do have that over here. You know that thing where he talks about the women going down to the river and sharing. It's called the hair salon.
Oh,
Come on. And the barber shop. You know you men are in there chatting, us women. You know, a woman will tell her business in the hair salon, and we're all sat around like, really? Yes, and my man did hair, and you know, and the men will be there, yeah, you know, my baby mother, she did this, and the other men will be backing him, you know you do. You know, so we have that here. It's just called the hair salon and the barber shop. But they will not go to, we don't believe in therapy in the black community. We're changing, it's changing. You get a lot of therapy in the hair salon, I'm telling you.
But there's something I need to really put across. There's no shame in grieving.
No.
Absolutely. Just like there's no shame in dying. We need to remember that. At all. And another thing that COVID has brought is the living losses. We're not mentioning that at all. People have lost jobs. People have lost their livelihoods. People have lost relationships. People have lost their freedoms. And then there's also multiple losses. Multiple losses meaning they've lost their dear ones, and then they've lost jobs at the same time.
At the same time.
That's very difficult.
That is very, very difficult to handle.
That's trauma on trauma on trauma on trauma.
Upon trauma on top of trauma, different levels of trauma. So we as therapists need to remember that. And also what's been lost as well, losses, is memories. People would have wanted to organize anniversaries,
Weddings as well,
graduations,
Right.
Children who have finished their universities.
Yeah.
People haven't been able to do that.
Yeah.
So those memories are lost. COVID has taken that away. So we should not forget the living losses that people are going through. We need to remember those, just like we
Powerful.
need to remember
Powerful.
the losses of our loved ones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Sheila.
Yeah. And another thing that I need to say
Of course,
is about children. That children also feel pain, they feel the
Yes.
loss.
Yeah, they do.
One thing that I actually was going to say is children need to know the truth, but they need to know it in child language.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we need to remember to do that,
To communicate with
to
them.
communicate
And
with.
really connect with them as well.
Absolutely, we need to know that. And I just feel so humbled being here, listening to the stories, your story, the other
Adelaide.
the other two,
Oh yeah, Amina and Abdi.
Yeah. And
Abdi
yes,
and is it Amina?
Amina,
yeah.
Amina.
Yeah.
It's been such a joy that I've been part of this, and thank you, Nathan. You've just done a wonderful job, and I hope that the evening just goes as well as it's began.
Thank you
for
so much. Sheila.
Thank
We've appreciated
you.
you coming
Yes.
in and
Thank
sharing
you.
your thoughts with us.
You're
It's
welcome.
been very, very enlightening for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, grief and loss is just one aspect of why people may struggle with their mental health. Our next guest is Peter Isabel, clinical psychologist at Sheffield Health and Social Care, who is joining us live from his home. Peter, hello. Oh, I don't think we have a mic on Peter.
I'm on mute. Hi.
Ah,
There you
now we
go.
can hear
Sorry.
you. How are you
Okay.
today, Peter?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good, thanks.
Peter, can you tell us about other aspects of mental health, psychosis, and how cannabis relates to this?
Yes, yeah. So can I just check, have I got 5 minutes? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, just to very quickly say thank you, Ursula, thank you, Sheila, thank you, Nathan. It's been a great presentation so far. What I've heard, what I've seen has been really good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the rest of the evening. And thank you for sharing your story. I've heard Ursula's story before, but just to say it's so powerful, and every time I hear it, it reverberates something. So thank you for sharing. But yeah, I'll talk about psychosis. I work in the Sheffield Early Intervention Service, so I was going to talk a bit about that, and then maybe I can bring in a little bit about cannabis and how that relates to psychosis. Are the slides still going to be able to be shown, or do I just need to go for it?
I think that the slides will be
Oh.
shown, yeah.
Yeah.
The slides are
There you go.
showing now on your
Brilliant.
screen.
Okay, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we go to the next slide. Yeah, so what is psychosis? So this kind of definition that I've got up is literally it's kind of the most widely accepted definition if you talk to most people who work in services. So it's this idea that there's changes in somebody's perception, someone's kind of thoughts, beliefs in such a way that it starts to cause problems. Next slide, please. I think the main thing to focus on, so I've underlined and bolded, is this idea of its changes in shared reality, but also the amount of distress that these experiences cause, and how those experiences, so the distress interferes with someone's ability to kind of live and have a satisfying life. And that's the key thing I think we need to focus on. I think anytime we talk about mental health problems, what we're really interested in or thinking about is how much this causes someone distress and how much this interferes with their ability to live and function and thrive and all those things. So yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, just to highlight that the explanations for what causes these things is, there's lots of debate in the literature. There's a lot of debate and discussion amongst professionals in the survivor community. There's lots of different explanations that people have offered. So I've just put on the screen there this idea that actually you've got this very traditional medical model, that suggests that it's, a disease, something to do with disorder, dysfunction, etc. And then you have the kind of the more biological explanations. It's about changes in neurochemicals and all these kind of things. And then you've got sort of those more developmental type explanations, which talk about it as being something that happens in relation to when someone's development is somehow interrupted or doesn't go well, or there's been things that have happened early on. And then you've got the more, if you like, cognitive, or the stuff where we look at how people interpret situations and things like that. So as a psychologist, we might think about all these different explanations, but what I'm more interested in, and I think what some of my colleagues would be more interested in, is a more holistic sort of approach. So thinking about all the different parts of a person, so their life history, life stress, thinking about what's going on in their environment at the moment, what kind of things are they contending with, some of the things that have been talked about today, and trauma. Trauma is a massive part of understanding the kind of things that lead to some of the changes that can kind of lead to sort of psychosis sort of developing. And cannabis, which I'll come on to a little bit, there's been strong links shown in the research between, use of cannabis and development of these kind of issues. And just on that slide, it says no two psychoses are the same. And that's just to say that because, just as we were talking about, there's all the different ways people can grieve. There's all the different ways that people can end up developing a psychosis. There is no one clear route that we know leads to psychosis. It's different for different people. And then I've got some other things there about other explanations, which might think more about spirituality and, the idea of spiritual awakenings, or, all kinds of different things there. Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, So this was, I don't have enough time for this, but I guess it was just thinking about, distress. And I think I mentioned that at the beginning, and how important or central the idea of distress is to why the psychosis develops. For me, a lot of these things are about human experience. Human experience happens on a continuum, and psychosis, for me, is just another one of those sorts of experiences. But where it becomes a problem is when it starts to interfere. It starts to be really difficult. So next slide, please. And this slide, I'm not sure how well people can see it, but it was just kind of showing how there is real overlap between different diagnoses. So we talked about different mental health problems, whether we're depression, bipolar, psychosis. When we look at the symptoms that make up all these different diagnoses, there's actually a lot of overlap. So sometimes you might see someone who has a primary depression, if you like, but they have psychotic symptoms, if you like. So the idea of having unusual beliefs that other people don't share, or hearing voices or other things that other people can't hear, and those sorts of things. Okay, next slide, please. I'll run out of time. And then just very quickly to talk on cannabis. So there's a lot of debate between academics and sort of scientists about how cannabis affects mental health, but fundamentally it's about the effect of cannabinoids on the brain. And you've got THC and you've got CBD. CBD has become really popular recently, but it's THC which is the one which has been shown to have the link with developing sort of unusual beliefs like paranoia, or hearing things or seeing things that other people can't. I think. So the slides, just to kind of sum it up, that THC stuff is not very good. Some people might find that they use cannabis as a way of coping with difficulties, but over time that could lead to other problems. So THC is what, if you like, has been shown to develop or cause psychosis to develop. So my advice would be to stay away from it, especially if you're young, because we know that a young and developing mind is susceptible to all kinds of substances. Of course. And that's it. I know I've gone over time. I'm really sorry.
No, it's okay, Peter. Thank you so much for showing us the slide. Hello?
That's it. Yeah, sorry. Next slide. I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Peter. We really appreciated you showing us the slides and giving us a good reflection as well of psychosis and also cannabis abuse. Thank you very much. I'm also joined here by Saika Naz. Apologies for the mispronunciation. a cognitive behavioral therapist within the specialist psychotherapy services who works with people suffering from depression and anxiety. Welcome to the show, Psycho.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd like to start with the first question.
Okay.
What are depression and anxiety?
So depression and anxiety are two common mental health problems, and they do tend to intersect. So often it's not unusual to find somebody who's depressed to also have anxiety and vice versa.
Yeah.
And in terms of their presentation, depression, for example, you can feel a bit hopeless, restless, and often it might be something that's embedded in the past, something's happened in the past that makes you feel quite sad, and it's a prolonged feeling and feeling quite low and down.
Yeah.
You know, in life things happen and we're very up and down with our mood, and that's okay. It's just that when we stay down and we stay down for a prolonged period of time, then we need to start thinking about getting some extra help. Yeah, and anxiety, it just, again, it's often embedded in future-based problems. What if something bad will happen? Maybe I won't be able to cope, and that creates a sense of fear, perhaps, an impending sort of fear about what may happen, maybe negative, and that can set off what we call the flight and fight response. You know, the adrenaline rushes around, and we could feel a bit restless with that. So the anxiety actually is, again, like an umbrella term, and within that we have different anxiety disorders. And today, you know, we've talked about social anxiety disorder, which is what Abdi was talking about.
Exactly.
And then obviously, so, you know, you've talked about trauma, for example, and PTSD, and that would fall under the anxiety disorders. Yeah.
What causes depression and anxiety?
Life.
Yes.
Literally.
Do you know, in a nutshell.
It's so many different aspects of our life, you know, work, relationships, health. You know, and there's a little bit more being said and done around physical health and the impact on our mental health, finances. You know, we've had austerity for 10 years and it's really hurt people, and that's impacting on people's mood. You know, and it could be adverse childhood experiences, it could be a history, you know, in your family, anything, honestly, anything and everything.
There's just so many things.
Absolutely, and sometimes it's one thing that just sort of breaks the camel's back, and sometimes it's just an accumulation of lots of different things, and sometimes it is like one big life event. You know, we often work with people from asylum seekers and refugees coming from war-torn countries, and then there's been a war there, and then they come here and there's trauma, there's multiple traumas, and it's really difficult. So it's really difficult to kind of pinpoint it to one or two really things and eliminate it.
There's so many things. And it varies as well, isn't
Absolutely.
it? What impact do they have on people's lives?
Do you know, we saw today in the testimonies, didn't we? And I feel like for me to add anything else to that would be a disservice to it. And I just think, you know, thank you to Ursula, Amina and Abdi actually for sharing their stories and opening up sort of parts of your lives to not just us here, but people out there who might be watching. And I just think, I really don't think I should really even add anything to that, because I just want to respect your voices and what you've shared today.
But I feel like what you've said already has such an impact for both sides, because in the black community it can be such, whereas we pass off anxiety as anger. You know, the child is just bad. He needs a lick, he needs a slap. That's what's wrong with him. Beat it out of him, kick it out of him. We pass it off anxiety because, you know, we haven't dealt with our own trauma. So how the hell am I supposed to deal with my child's trauma? But it works the same way in the white community when they're dealing with black people, especially in the mental health wards. And I know this as a black person who has gone through the mental health system. I would watch when I would have a meltdown. It wasn't anxiety, I was threatening. But when the white person in the same ward was having the same meltdown as me, they're just anxious. You know, if a black person is talking about something and they're the angry black woman, the angry black man, but a white person is talking and they're just passionate. Come on now, you need to, you know, I'm not saying there's blame on both sides. We need to own our behaviour as black people. We need to own our stuff, what we do, what we can do, what we can't do, but also the predominantly white organisations, the white community need to stop treating us a certain way based on, you know, what they've heard or what the media has shown them and the stereotypes.
It shouldn't have a stigma, it should be a lot more objective and constructive.
Exactly.
the right type of language will help diagnose people correctly.
Will help,
and help them on the
definitely.
road to recovery. If you're just labeling people certain things, you know, and you're not trying to really understand them, all you're going to do is frustrate them.
It doesn't make me want to come for help.
Yeah, and it doesn't make you open yourself up to be helped as well.
But it's the same in our community, because we're not good at, we don't have the tools.
Yeah.
You know, somebody comes to us and says, oh, you know, I'm really struggling with my marriage because my husband is beating me. You know, I left him. You know, that's the first, you're not leaving him. That's the first thing. As soon as somebody says that, you shut down. It's about the approach. We've got to become a safe space within our own community. Stop looking to outside to say, well, the services aren't doing anything, the white organizations aren't doing anything. What can we do within our own communities to help ourselves? And something like this is the start of it. If one person watching this thinks, you know what, I never thought of it like that before. Maybe I do need to be a bit more softer with my child or with my husband or even with myself. Then we've achieved something here.
I think there's a lot to be said for self-compassion. We don't talk about it often enough. And I just like to say I'm really sorry about the experiences that you've had. And it is a problem. And as psychological therapist professionals, we need to own it. And we need to say, actually, what can we do differently? And how can our approach be more compassionate towards the black communities? And I can only just really apologise, and I hope for my own practice it's something that we're taking forward in some of the work that we're doing outside of Sheffield as well, is thinking about how do we make care culturally sensitive and responsive and compassionate towards communities. But what I'm also hearing is perhaps there needs to be a dialogue about you know, the communities and the stigma, maybe how mental health and difficult life experiences are held within the community, but also thinking about a conversation with the professionals as well, and actually where do we meet in the middle. And I really hope today is just the beginning of a different conversation, and we can have more of these conversations, you know, off camera.
I also wanted to ask, what help is available?
Okay, so in Sheffield, for example, and then Sheila talked about being part of the Improving Access to Psychological Therapies service, which is the Sheffield IAP service. And they do have, you know, people can self-refer. You don't need to wait for somebody to refer you. You can see a doctor. They can support you to seek help. You can do computerized cognitive behaviour therapist programs, telephone treatments. Obviously, under the current circumstances, they're not doing face-to-face, so a lot of the work is being done. Video call. So you can have therapy in the comfort of your own home. And I appreciate there'll be people who would prefer face-to-face, and I think they just have to watch and see what happens with the guidance, and we just have to adhere to that. So in Sheffield, actually, is a particularly good service, offering lots of services and different treatments. You have a counselling service, cognitive behaviour therapy. You can get also the low intensity CBT therapy that you can receive. So there's the shorter sessions, and I think I would really encourage anybody watching today thinking, okay, maybe just give it a go and have a conversation with the person on the other side, so the other person like me or anybody else, and said, you know what, you're not asking me about my experiences of racism and discrimination and structural racism. It harms just as much as racism does, you know, the overt racism that's easy to call out. And we haven't really touched on that today, but in the context of Black Lives Matter, I think it's really pertinent that we talk about this. And actually, bullying, harassment, discrimination, it all affects people's mental health. And try having a dialogue with your therapist and say, you know, it's not working for me, it's working for me. Because often I'm finding, again, is that therapists don't want to offend and get it wrong. And what they do is they don't ask important questions, and the person on the other side is waiting to be asked about their experience of racism, for example. And then there's a void there, and then things are being left unsaid that are important. So how do we have that dialogue? I think is important.
I hear what you're saying about, you know, the IAP service is there, but this is another issue that the black community have with predominantly white services like the IAP service. Stop asking us to come to you. Come to us and meet us where we are. Come here to Sadaka. Come to West Street. Come to Pittsmore. Come and meet us where we are in our pain. And when you come, bring the black people with you first. Put the black people at the front, because if I see them, I'm more willing to engage with you. Because I don't want to go to a psychiatrist or a therapist who's white and say, listen, I've got a problem with juju. And they're, oh, what's that? He's asking me, what's juju? If you don't understand what juju is, if you don't understand my spirituality, my culture, my history, learn my history about black slavery and where that pain and trauma comes from and how it's been poured into me from my grandmother and my great-grandmother and Fia grandmother. understand that. If you don't understand that, you cannot help me. Stop asking us to come to you. But at the same time, the black community need to own. Stop saying, oh, it's because of white people we have mental health issues. Because of racism we have mental health issues. Mental health issues was there long before that.
Yeah.
Some of those things. And mental health issues is there because we pass abuse off as culture. We pass rape and sexual abuse off as culture. And I know, as somebody who's running an organization that is picking up the pieces in 2020 of what was been done to me 46 years ago, still today working with young people who have been abused behind closed door, and it's been passed off as culture or religion. But because we don't want to deal with it, we say it's the white man. Oh, it's white organizations why we've got mental health. Oh, it's the police and police brutality why we've got mental health. Own our mess.
Yeah.
Own what we do as black people, and you white people own what you do. And if we all sit in our corner and own our mess and work it out in our corner, then we can come together and say, you know what, I'm not blaming white people, I'm just telling you where I've messed up. White people are saying, I'm not blaming black people, I'm telling you where I've messed up. Okay, now we can start a conversation that, where do we go from here?
Exactly.
So it sounds like, Ursula, what we're asking for here is open, honest and transparent conversations.
Yeah.
And we've
Both
had
ways,
this
isn't it?
conversation
Both ways.
before,
we
haven't we?
We have.
Both ways.
It used to be, as professionals, we absolutely need to own where we get things wrong, and there's plenty over the years where we haven't got right. And I think that's a good starting point for us. We need to stop pretending that we've got it right with the black community, because we haven't. And as professionals, that's, I think, where we need to own it. But we also need to make time for each other and sit down.
That's right.
You know,
have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Psycho, as part of your role with the British Association of Behavioural and Cognitive Therapies, also known as BABCP, so you can Google it as well, you were involved in the development of an IAPT BAME positive practice guide. Can you tell us why that was important to develop and what the guide does?
It's here.
Oh, perfect.
It's got a streaks because of the printer, but it's here. It's available on the babcp.com website. There's a short guide and there's a long guide. And this was commissioned by the NHS, and it's actually by the National IAP team, because there's a recognition that when BME people, black, Asian and minority ethnic people enter services, that they tend not to stay in treatment for long, and they have poorer outcomes as well.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle to get them in, and when they're in, they're having poorer outcomes. And actually, we need to look at this. And this guide is predominantly about all the structural issues that prevent the black community and Asian community and other minority ethnic communities from receiving good quality care. And what we do in this guide is that set clear standards that IAPT, which is primary care mental health services in NHS England, they need to be striving towards and adhering to. So they need to be talking to their local communities, talking to their commissioners, and coming up with culturally sensitive care for their local communities. And in the guide, we talk about things like workforce development. To have representation in the workforce is important. Now, does this mean that I only work with Asian people? No, it means I bring something into the profession that maybe a white person can't or a black person can't. But I always insist on working with white people. I want to work with everybody, but I'm able to bring something of me and somebody else will bring something of them. And that's how we work. Absolutely. And that's how we have culturally inclusive care. And it doesn't need to be something completely separate out of the mainstream, and we need to stop thinking in that way. We need to think about opening our hearts and minds and making the mainstream services more culturally sensitive and just being flexible. And we're very clear with this guide, and it's signed off by Simon Stevens, the man at the top of NHS England. And anybody who's watching today, please get a copy of this guide. Go to your local community organisations and your local IAP services and your commissioners, because you can't implement some of this without commissioners putting some money in. And I think it's the absolute right thing to do now. We can't keep having the same circular conversations and not moving the agenda forward. Absolutely.
It's very important that it moves forward, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you very much, Psycho.
Thank you.
Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your thoughts as well.
Thank you.
Don't forget, if you have any questions for our speakers and guests, then please send them to us with the use the question function on the website, or tweet with the hashtag BMHlive, and we'll aim to respond to as many as we can over the course of the event. Apologies, BMHlive. And we'll aim to respond to as many of the questions as we can over the course of the event. Before moving on to our next theme, it is important to say that we know that mental health covers such a broad spectrum of conditions, and with a wide variety of support options, we couldn't possibly cover all of them today. However, if you are seeking support and we haven't covered it today, then please visit sheffieldmentalhealth.co.uk, The address should be on the screen right now. This is a searchable directory of all the mental health activities and support in Sheffield, including a section on services operating during COVID-19. We'll put the address up at the end as well so you can have access to it. As we have been hearing from all our speakers at this event, it's important to get support early in whatever form that it may look like, so that your mental health doesn't escalate into a crisis. However, we know that there is an overrepresentation of black people, particularly black males, on the inpatient mental health wards. For our final theme, we thought it was important to acknowledge that and provide you with an overview of the Mental Health Act and what that means for your rights. So we'd like to bring back Adelaide.
Yay.
Hello, Adelaide.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, so could you talk us through about the Mental Health Act, please?
Yeah, a little bit. I want to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer because I'm not a Mental Health Act expert. So I'm not a legal expert. What I'm going to be talking through and I guess discussing is a little bit of my experience over the last 2 decades of working as a mental health nurse, primarily in sort of crisis and inpatient settings. So I think we will get started off shortly. I'm just waiting for the
slides to begin.
To come
and
through, if that's okay.
Possibly a change of my device as well.
Okay, so next slide, please. Thanks. I think I'll sort of preempt what's going to come up. What I thought would be useful for everybody is if we talk through a little bit of the history of kind of the Mental Health Act and where we are today with the Mental Health Act 1983 and the amendments that happened in 2007. So if I could go to the next slide, please.
Okay, we're having slight difficulties, but we've just got it up now.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you. Okay, so Middlewood Hospital, I mean, for those that live and have been born and bred in Sheffield, you will recognize that name because it was the main asylum that was in Sheffield. There were actually 2 asylums that served South Yorkshire. One was in Wakefield, and then in 1866, I think, there were discussions that started because obviously the oversubscribing, it was overcrowded, and they decided that they needed to open a second asylum. And over the years, it went up to about 2,000 beds. And, you know, Sheffield Health and Social Care Trust, as it exists now, actually came across when Middlewood was closed down and now serves the people of Sheffield in terms of their mental health care. So in about 1948, you had over 100 asylums in the UK, and it was after the Second World War and obviously the birthing of the NHS. And at that time, the Percy Commission was launched between 1954 to 1957, where they talked about amalgamating the asylums into the NHS and to not have them treated differently, so to actually create general hospitals for mental health, just as you had general hospitals for, you know, kind of general medicine and just normal medical conditions. So there was something about starting to have a parity of care for mental health patients alongside anybody who's got any other medical condition. I think also the discussion started about actually, should we be housing people in these big asylums, the abuses that used to go on, et cetera, et cetera. I think by 1959, the first Mental Health Act was birthed. And it sort of started to look at giving people some rights, some direction about, actually, we probably need to be caring for people in the community, in their homes, as opposed to having people in these large institutions. It took a long time to get there, but we did eventually get there. So 1983 is the current legislation that we work to in terms of the Mental Health Act. The Community Care Act of 1990 finally saw mental health care move into the community, with hospital care being there for people when they're in crisis. So, things have evolved over a long, long time. And in 1996, that's when Middlewood shut for the people of Sheffield. And we now have Sheffield Health and Social Care. 2007, we had the Mental Health Act amendments. So that's just a whistle run through in terms of the history of the kind of Mental Health Act. I just thought it would be important to kind of give it a little bit of context to start off with. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so in terms of just an overview of the Mental Health Act, everything that I'm going to be talking about is easily accessible on the internet. Please Google. I think part of the request for this session was about people don't know.
Yeah.
If I can tell you, all you need to do is Google. Honestly, everything is there. If you are, I guess, a brainy buff and you want to actually look at the law, you can access the Mental Health Act law directly. But you can also access the Mental Health Act Code of Practice, which tells us how to do stuff. So there's the law in terms of the legal framework that is available, which is the Mental Health Act 1983. Then you've got the Code of Practice, which tells us what to do. So as health professionals, it also sets the expectation for the general public in terms of what we should be doing. Yeah. There are also easy guides, that have been condensed for people to read. They're very accessible, and I would encourage people to just Google information. There's so many people like Mind, the Royal College of Psychiatry, lots of different organizations, the NHS, obviously gov.uk. Everybody's got something, the CQC, everybody. There's a lot of information for people out there, so don't feel like you're waiting for somebody to tell you that information. You can look for it yourself. It's at the end of your fingertips on your phone, which most of us have smartphones. The Code of Practice also has clear guiding principles, and this is really about ensuring that when the Mental Health Act is being applied, that we are considering individual situations, that we are considering people's individual values, that we are looking at what their personal interests are as part of the decision making when we are applying the Mental Health Act. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so the three parts that I'm going to cover really when I sort of try and explain a little bit more around the rights are part one, which defines why somebody goes into hospital. So you tend to need to have a mental disorder, and you're needing to be assessed or treated. Yeah. Then there's something about the risk that you might be posing to yourself or the risk that you might be posing to others. Yeah. And that might be directly or inadvertently. But those are sort of, I guess, the conditions that would mean that you would come under the framework of the Mental Health Act for treatment and assessment. Part two is the civil section. So for somebody to be able to be admitted into hospital, again, there has to be a legal framework that accompanies them. People don't just make decisions. Your doctor can't just see you and say, oh no, I need you to go into hospital, so therefore you go into hospital. Actually, there's a whole process that you have to go through with, kind of usually two doctors and an approved mental health professional to make the application. So it's actually quite a serious process, and it's not something that we take very lightly at all, because it is a legal requirement. And then the Part 3 of the Mental Health Act covers the interface with the criminal justice system. So those people that have ended up in court and are being accused for whatever crime, and there's a concern that there's something about their mental health that either led to the criminal activity they undertook, or that they were unwell when they did what they did. So, and also people in prison. So if somebody is in prison and they found to have either developed a mental health problem or are in crisis, again, that Part 3 of the Mental Health Act allows them to be transferred over to hospital environment for mental health treatment. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So your rights. You have a right to information. You have a right to information as the patient who is having the Mental Health Act applied to them, as the carers and family of that patient. The nearest relative is important. That's found under Section 26 of the Mental Health Act, and it clearly stipulates who your nearest relative is. And this person is the person that's going to be consulted as part of the process. So it's taken into consideration what that nearest relative is going to say. The nearest relative can also ask for you to be detained, so they can contact the mental health services, medical professionals, and say that they're concerned and that you can go through a process of application. So that's possible as well. You've got a right to legal representation when you're appealing against your section. So if you're detained or sectioned, you can appeal against your section. You've got a right to privacy, to dignity, to be made to feel safe as part of the process. You've also got a right to say what you want. So if you're somebody who's involved in mental health services already, you can sit down with your key workers and you can do an advance statement of your wishes. So if you were to become unwell, this is how I would like to be treated. This is what works for me. So if you think about, I guess, for Black people, it's really important that you're able to describe, I suppose, and give the cultural context of what might be happening to you. So people know maybe what is within the context of your culture, but also if you then going beyond that, people understand that you've crossed the line. So I think there's so many ways that we can use, I guess, the rights that we have. So it's important that we are able to engage with our workers. You can talk about, you know, the treatments that you feel work for you or things that you don't feel work for you. I have to put a caveat there because it's not totally legally binding. It's something that we have to consider, and we absolutely, it's one of the first things that we look for. Does this person have an advance statement? What is that statement saying? Because it guides us, because we're often having to make very quick decisions. Now, if somebody's already said, this is what I want, then absolutely, it's so much easier for us to go straight into that and do that. And it's the person's wishes.
Exactly.
Obviously, we also have to have clinical judgment. So sometimes, although you might feel, yes, that is the right thing, but in this moment in time and the way that person is presenting, we might feel with our experience, with our expertise, with our knowledge, that actually this might be the best thing for you to do. But we would always have a conversation about it. Keeping your personal information confidential. I'm not really going to cover it because I think that was covered in terms of the importance of confidentiality. Visiting patients in hospital. This is a serious one because I think often a time people, and I think Ursula and I have discussed this many a time around, you know, people really, I suppose they're heartbreaking. Why are they not letting us visit our loved one? We don't know what's happening to them behind those closed doors. People have a choice, right? And people can decide who they want to visit and who they don't want to visit.
Exactly.
And as long as they've got capacity to make that decision, we agree to that. They may also say, we don't want our information shared. Now, we have to abide by that because that's that person's wishes, and they may have really good reasons as to why they don't want us to share that information at that particular time. What we can do and what we prefer to do is contact the family or friends, the loved ones, and ask them for information. And it's really important that people engage in that because actually often we need to corroborate what that person has.
Usually the testimonies that
absolutely, it helps. Exactly, it helps with our assessment. So I don't want people to feel like they cannot speak to us because we're not allowing them to speak to their loved ones, because actually we're just trying to do the right thing.
Exactly,
But it is important for you to talk to us because then it helps us understand what's going on with your loved one, and we can give them the help that they need. And obviously you can appeal and you can go to a tribunal. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I just thought I'd touch on these two pieces of, I suppose, reports that I'm just going to cover quickly that kind of give the context of the Black man's experience in mental health services.
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to outline it because the truth is out there. You know, this is not a myth. This is not something that black people make up.
Yeah.
We have official government reports that tell us the disparities that black people experience in mental health services. So this is an audit done in 2017. It's an amazing audit, and I think, you know, for anybody who's interested in sort of inequalities and the disparities in health generally speaking, needs to go and read that report, because I think it's quite an eye-opener for people who might be in denial, for people who might not get it, for people that might not understand. I think this is a useful starting point. I just picked a couple of things that were relevant, I thought, to mental health. So the first one, it talks about this. So I think this was from an audit done in 2014, where it talks about, you know, anxiety and depression being prevalent with black women, and actually the discrepancy between, I guess, your white women and your black women. And I think it's often, you know, we're told shinga, you know, which, like Sheila, I'm also from Zimbabwe, and it's about being strong. You've got to stay strong because, you know, we are strong black women. And, you know, we often carry a huge load on our backs. And as much as Ursula was talking about, I do believe that we have got a responsibility to ask for help and seek for help as much as services should be culturally competent and sensitive. Yeah. I mean, it was estimated that, you know, 3 out of 100 black men experienced psychotic disorder in the previous year. This was 10 times more prevalent than white men. 10 times. Wow. We cannot live in denial. So as a community, we cannot live in denial. As services that provide mental health services, we cannot live in denial. We cannot ignore this. This is, it's you could call it an epidemic. It's you know, this is not good. And we've got to look at why that is, what is happening here. Black adults are least likely to be in receipt of any treatment, medication, counseling, therapy. Now the question is it that we're not going to get help? Or is it that when we try and get help, that it's not available?
That
it's
the
both.
right support.
It's both.
It's both.
I think there's both.
It's both, and we've both got to step up. Both sides have got to step up to the table and change these statistics. Next slide, please. Okay, so this report, or I guess facts and figures, were published in May of this year, so very much hot off the press. So black people are 4 times more likely than white people to be detained under the Mental Health Act. We are more likely to present under the criminal justice system. We are more likely to be on high-dose antipsychotics. We are more likely to have experiences of being restrained, of being secluded. I've been in services for 20 years. When I started my training in 1993, I don't know if many of you have heard of BBD. Now, I'm not talking about Bill, Bev, and DeVoe, for those of you poison.
Who know that?
So I'm not talking about BBD. I'm talking about the concept of big, black, and dangerous.
Hey.
This was from a report published in 1990. I'm sure it was 1990. The Blackwood Report, which talked about the concept of big, black, and dangerous, and it was on the back of, I think it was Orville. I keep calling Richard, but I'm sure it was Orville Blackwood, who died in one of the special hospitals, and there'd been 2 other deaths of black males. And, you know, there was this disparity, again, in terms of everything that I've just said in 2020 was happening in 1993. Nothing has changed, right? Nothing has changed. Now, what I know, and growing up as a black person, as a Christian, as a nurse, as a woman, is that you have your circle of influence. So what is it that you can change? right?
Yeah.
You can only change what you are responsible for. I can't force somebody else to change. I think I should speak up. I should petition them. I should ask. I should demand. But I cannot make that change if they do not want to change.
Yeah.
What I can change is my response. So what is it that we can do? What is it that is in our society that we can change? In the home, what do we talk about in terms of mental health? Do we just allow open, honest conversations around the dinner table with our children, with our husbands, with our cousins, our aunties, our grandparents? Have we created that culture where if I have a problem, I'm not going to be languishing on my own, but I'm able to come to the table and say,
And speak to
Ursula,
Yeah,
I'm feeling like this, I need help, I'm struggling. And sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes it's somebody to hold your hand who's going to take you, I think it was Abdi that talked about it in terms of, his, I can't remember, mom, auntie, somebody took him to the therapist.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's all we need to do. Our churches, right? Why don't we train people in the church? We have counselors. Why don't we train them up so that they can provide counseling to the congregation and actually address those issues?
Yes.
Because we have real issues on our hands. Black Caribbeans had the highest rates of detention. White people had the lowest rates. Why?
I just wanted to ask you, so breaking down some of the embedded race structures and supporting the NHS Black engagement isn't just about receiving mental health support. It can also be a good career option.
Yeah. It can be a good career option. I think in terms of mental health services, we are struggling for people of color. We need to have Black people be represented. Over the years, as I've gone through the various stages of my career, whether it's on the wards, whether it's in meetings, where we, influencing practice, we influencing what's being set up in terms of services.
Yeah.
Often you would find yourself as a single Black person. Now, I think Clive Clark, who's currently our Deputy Chief Exec, is a Black man, a Black Caribbean man, and he's been at the top. And I remember starting out in our organization and thinking, yes, we've made it, we've got a Black man at the top. And then I realized the distance between me and him was too far.
Yeah.
So we have got to create a ladder. We have got to have representation at every level for us to make a difference, for our needs to be heard, for us to make a change. We have got to be represented at every single level. So whether it's therapies, whether it's medicine, whether it's nursing, whether it's OT, whether it's dietitians, whether it's whatever. We need to have representation, because when people walk through that door, they need to be confident that there's somebody who looks like me, who talks like me, who walks like me, that understands me. So even if I don't see that person, I know that there's a voice there who can speak up for who I am and what I need to make my situation better, right? But we have got a responsibility to do that. We can make that change. Okay? So when we talk about rights, we can, I suppose, create the environment so that we can exercise those rights, or we can actually challenge what's being done, and we can make it better for our own experience.
Sometimes amend things, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, can I have the next slide, please? The next one, that's just stats. Thank you. Okay, so what I decided to do for the last bit, hopefully I don't know how much time I've got, but I'm going to quickly run through this. I think storytelling is a very good way of communicating, and I think it brings information to life. So I want us to think about Micah, a 19-year-old male. Now, Micah that I'm going to talk about is an amalgamation of a lot of young Black males that I've come across over the years. We all know Micah, right? So this is a young black guy. You can, imagine him with his fade, just happy-go-lucky, just really somebody who's quite cool, just no problems at all. And then all of a sudden there's a change. He is hardly at home. When he's at home, he's hiding away in his bedroom. Sometimes just for days not speaking to anybody, and then he goes out. You're concerned about the crowds that he's hanging out with. You're actually suspecting that maybe he's been taking something because his behavior has significantly changed. He's just not quite himself. We all know a Micah, 19-year-old, who there was a lot of promise in terms of what he wanted to do. Maybe he wanted to do engineering, maybe he wanted to do, I guess, interior designing, whatever. And then all of a sudden he's not achieving. Something's changed. And what do? You need to change your friends. You need to be at home. You need to be studying. You need to do this. You need to do that. This is what we do. And we don't sit down with our sons, our Micahs, and talk to them and ask them what's going on. So I want to walk through what happens when somebody is admitted under the Mental Health Act.
Sure.
So I'm going to start off with Micah. He's gone out to town. Well, we think he's gone out, but he's ended up in a fight. It's in the middle of the night, up in West Street in Sheffield. And he's ended up being arrested by the police with a few other people. But then they worried about his mental health. So he's then placed on a Section 136. So what is a Section 136? Well, it's where the police, where they find somebody, a member of the public, in a public area, and they're concerned about their mental health. So it gives them the power to take that person to a place of safety where they can be assessed by mental health professionals so that at least they can be signposted.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, it's a good thing. But we've got the police picking up something that's supposedly a mental health issue. We know the stats about black people and being picked up by the police and mental health. So he goes to the 136 suite, and whilst he's there, he assessed by 2 doctors and an approved mental health professional. They decide that he needs to be admitted under Section 2 of the Mental Health Act. Now, Section 2 of the Mental Health Act is for assessment, and you can also be treated. So nobody really knows what's going on with Micah here. And we feel, he isn't safe to be on his own. Something is seriously wrong. His parents are talking to us about the concerns that they've had and the things that they've noticed. But, thought that he just needed to snap out of it. So we see that something needs to be done. So he gets admitted to the hospital. Now, when the person arrives on the ward, the approved mental health professional, so the AMP, hands over legal documents that have been signed by everybody to the nurses. The nurses have to receive those documents and they have to accept them, and they have to sign that they've accepted these documents and that they have been appropriately documented, and that this is a legal process.
Yeah.
So we have to do things right, because this is a serious thing. For somebody to be detained under the Mental Health Act, it's a very serious thing, because it gives us a lot of rights that if we carried out in the community, I would be locked up for kidnapping because I'm not letting somebody leave the place. So when that person is admitted, we inform them that they've been detained under the Mental Health Act. We have to explain their rights to them. We have to tell them that we have to make sure that they understand, and we have to keep explaining their rights to them until they have understood. So we have to keep going with that, and we have to do it every single day. You're telling somebody about their rights. We have to tell them that they have a right to legal representation. They can appeal against their section. By appealing, it means that they get to apply to a mental health review tribunal. They have an independent panel, so there's a judge, there's a doctor, there's a lay person that gets to hear their side of the story.
Exactly.
So why they feel that they don't need to be in hospital. And the consultant who's looking after the patient, the nurse who's looking after the patient, and the community mental health person that looks after the patient has to go there and give their position as to why that person needs to stay in hospital. You also have a right to an advocate. So you've got absolute support, somebody who can stand up for you, somebody who can speak on your behalf. So people do have a lot of rights. The other thing that people can or cannot do, I guess, you can't just leave.
No. Yeah, you can't just
right?
walk out.
You can't just walk out the door. So you have to have Section 17 leave written up by the responsible clinician, so the consultant in charge of your care. They have to give you that piece of paper, and your relative and anybody else who's involved in your care, to let you know that you can go out for 30 minutes for fresh air. So you've got a lot of rights as a human being that are stripped away from you. Sometimes there are things that we might say that you can't have because we're scared they might hurt you or somebody else might hurt themselves. So a lot of things are stripped away from you. And I already talked about visiting. You know, that's quite a contentious issue when somebody comes into hospital. So already you can see for somebody like Micah coming into the healthcare system, it almost feels like things are a little bit too late. It feels like things have already gone too far, which is why it's so important that as a Black community, we start having the discussions. It's so important that our services, so Sheffield Health and Social Care, communicates and engages with the Black community so that we stop people from coming into hospital. There is a place and a space for that happening. However, we can maybe avoid that getting to that point if we all intervene early and make sure that people access the right services. So in terms of your rights, please do, Google. If somebody's admitted, please talk to the doctors, the managers, the nurses on the ward. Everybody is more than happy to engage and share with you, your understanding of the rights. There was one last, I know I've run out of time, but I really do want this to happen, and I'm so sorry. The last slide, I really do need to show it because I think it's a quote that really emphasizes a point. So when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment it grows in, not the flower.
That's
very powerful.
Right?
Very powerful.
So from services, the Black person isn't the problem. In the home, your son, your daughter, your child, your mother, your father, your husband isn't the problem. We need to change. And if we start that journey to change, I think we'll find ourselves, those statistics should start to come down.
Exactly.
Okay, I know I'm running out of time,
No,
so I'm going to shut up now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Adelaide. You really gave a full scope of so many things, and it's been so useful to understand and to look at it from such a different perspective, because I don't think people understand what actually happens. There's so much detail that goes into it, and there's so much knowledge that you can access. If you know your rights and you know the information is available out there, then you can use those resources to either maybe help defend yourself or maybe help empower yourself. Most importantly, empower yourself or any loved ones that are affected with mental health.
I have to admit, I was crying during that because it just reminded me of when I was sectioned so many times and having my rights removed from me, not being able to leave whenever I wanted to. And there's a saying that I love that it says, "They speak of my drinking, but never of my thirst." People drink for a reason. I was acting out for a reason. I wasn't mad or a bad child. I was being abused. I had mental health issues because I was being abused. Exactly. Let's look underneath the behaviour. Don't stop looking at the drinking and think, why is that person thirsty? Why are they drinking that way? Why are they acting that way? Why are they behaving that way?
Thank you so much for that. And that's a beautiful quote as well. It's the idea of looking at the cause of things rather than just looking at one layer. People always do things for a reason.
Yes.
Yeah. Our last theme is hearing from Black people who have made successful careers in the NHS mental health field. Let's start with Aboila Allison, Chief Pharmacist at SHSC.
Abiola.
Sorry. Abiola or Allison. If we just get the video.
My name is Abiola Allinson. I'm Chief Pharmacist at Sheffield Health and Social Care NHS Foundation Trust. My base is at the Michael Carlisle Centre in Netheredge. I've worked with the Trust for 2 years now, and it's a very interesting organisation. We're there to try to keep people well from a mental health perspective. The mental health pharmacist's role is actually quite varied, but I'll talk about it from a Sheffield perspective before I can try and broaden a little bit. We have clinical pharmacists. Clinical pharmacists, they go onto wards. What do they do on wards? They support the ward team in ensuring the choices of therapies are appropriate. They talk about counselling patients. They are patient advocates and make sure the choices that the patients have and the patients are given the right doses for safety. We're a key member of the multidisciplinary team. And what does that mean? We, with the nurses, psychologists, OTs and the doctors, try to have full wraparound treatment and care for a patient to ensure that the management is holistic. We look at it pharmacologically. We also do education and training, and that's for patients and also for staff in appropriate uses of medication and the background to medication, how it works, why it works, and why we actually have the different options. And so coming into pharmacy for me, initially I wasn't quite sure. And that's the honest thing. I went in going, oh, these are how medicines work. But once we got into it, the joy and the understanding grew about it not just being about how medicines work, but how it works for people, how they react to them, and how you can make a difference to them. I was one of the lucky people that had 3 years at university. It's now a 4-year course, and at the end of it you do a pre-registration year before you have to do an exam, and if you do pass the exam you then become a newly qualified pharmacist. What was really good last year, we had the Working Better Together conference. I joined the BAME group only last year after being in the organisation for a year. I wasn't sure what it would entail when I joined the BAME group, but what I found has been a very supportive group who have the best interests of trying to work for equality. And it's been great because it's quite a diverse group when you're in there. Talking about the Working Better Together conference, that for me was almost a watershed point for me. I felt privileged to be asked to actually co-present the conference, and what was great about that was to share my own personal experience first as an opening for them, and then listening to some really strong and powerful testimony of how working better together can actually change things. And it's about both sides. It's not just about being in the staff network group, it's actually about how we can work collaboratively together to actually improve everybody's lot. I'm the chief pharmacist for the Trust. What does that mean? I head up the pharmacy department. If I look at my job description, it goes into about 9 pages. I suppose a quick synopsis of the job description is I am responsible for medicines optimization within the Trust as a safe and effective use of medicines. So an aspect that like my patient safety, the safety and making sure the medications we actually bring in the organisation are safe for our patients, and make sure that we have the right staffing complement to support the ward teams and the staff in the organisation. For me as a BAME person, of course, thinking now about the Black Lives Matter movement, in addition to the COVID-19 and the increased risk, I am acutely aware as the person being at the centre of it, and that actually, for me, puts even more emphasis on how I should be supporting my team, not just the BAME members of my team, but the entire team, in making sure that I'm keeping them safe. So their safety and well-being is actually paramount to me. Beyond my team, I'm also in the organisation, part of wider leadership in the organisation, being able to speak out about some of the concerns in relation to Black Lives Matter and COVID, and how we can do things either differently and improve. Because if we don't challenge ourselves, how do we get better? How do I aspire to be in the position if I don't see me there? I don't know if it's for recording, but just thinking about it, moving up in different organisations, I remember going to different interview panels and being the only diversity there in context. And I suppose the key change, for example, within SHSC is the requirement that for senior leadership posts, you need to have a BME member. That's a great start. I think moving forward, there should be an opportunity whereby to try to redress some of the imbalances where appropriate BME who are actually qualified in those roles should be able to get the opportunity to be at that table to give the best hand possible to be part of the team.
Joining us to discuss career options is Clive Clark, Deputy Chief Executive at SHSC. Hello, Clive.
Hi.
Welcome. Could you tell us a bit about your role and experience working at Sheffield Health and Social Care?
Okay, yeah, sure. Firstly, just thanks very much for inviting me along this evening. It's been a really interesting evening, so thank you and congratulations to all involved. My current job title is Deputy Chief Exec. I'm also the Gold Commander for COVID. That means I lead as far as the emergency planning for COVID. And I also chair the Sheffield Citywide Impact of COVID on BAME Communities strategy group that feeds directly into the Sheffield system, the accountable care system. So I've got a variety of roles at the moment that I undertake.
Could you tell us slightly more just about how that impacts just the day-to-day things that you do?
Okay. Well, the day-to-day things are I'm in my role, I suppose I deputise a lot for the chief exec, but I more importantly carry a leadership role. So I sit on the board of the trust and lead in all aspects as an executive and a unitary board member in all aspects of the operation, but also things like health and safety and safeguarding, etc. All aspects of the trust and how the trust works. I lead a lot of things external to the trust and working as a part of the Accountable Care Partnership, which is a Sheffield Citywide, all the anchor, the organisations coming together. We look at planning, we look at strategic development, etc. going forward. So I help and support in doing that from both the front and also the back as far as leadership.
Oh, thank you, Clive. And would you say that there are different types of career options available for people of the BAME or black minorities who are interested in getting involved in the industry?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, when I left school many years ago, I had a fantastic time at school, maybe too good, because I left with nothing. So my experience has all been, I mean, don't get me wrong, I believe in education. I push young people because education is a way of getting out of some of the issues that we've got as a community. But for me, moving first into industry and finding that wasn't for me, but then working with people and initially training as a nurse, back in the day where you didn't find many black guys in nursing, that's for sure. And then training as a social worker and leading Sheffield City Council mental health social work department for a few years before moving on into health. There are a plethora of jobs, and you see the doctors and the nurses and the therapists, and they're fantastic. Yeah. But there's the industry and what does from back office functions, accounting, estates, IMST, IT, pharmacy, you name it. There are over 300 different professions that you can get involved in, and I would encourage any young person. My nephew has just qualified as a radiographer, works in Manchester, so he's following in the family trade. Wow. My mother was a support worker working for the trust before I even started, and that. So it is a great place to work. There's and the NHS is making strides and developing. And I want to see more people of colour, as Adelaide said, throughout all the structures within the organisation, because that's important.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to cut you short, Clive, but that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for your input.
No problem. Thank you and all the best. More than happy.
Thank you, Clive. that's it from our speakers. I'm conscious we have run quite over, which is fine as it's important. It's a really, really important discussion to have that we've been sharing this evening. However, we have received so many comments and questions during the event that we really only have time for a few. So just to reassure, we will respond to all the questions on the website over the next few weeks and tweets out the link to the responses as well. So our first question is going to be for Clive, if we still have Clive.
I'm still here.
Yeah, so I just have one other question. So if we can just try to keep the answers to maybe about a minute, because we're low on time. Okay. So I'm going to get you with a big question. So are there any provisions being put in place to specifically address the mental state that most people, children included, will be in when the pandemic resides?
Okay, there's a lot of work that's going on. I'll give you one example. Mm-hmm. There's an umbrella organisation called the Psychological Board, and that's a board that's got a lot of talking therapies from statutory organisations to voluntary organisations that are working and looking at what is the offer for emotional and psychological needs of people of Sheffield, including children. So there is work going on in a number of different areas, but certainly from a kind of talking intervention perspective, that is being taken forward by the Psychological Board that feeds into, again, the Sheffield-wide health and social care system.
Thank you very much, Clive. Our second question is for Adelaide. Why are mental health services mainly staffed by white people? This makes black people and other minorities feel outnumbered, unwelcomed, misunderstood, and uncomfortable to approach them.
Wow, that's a good question. I think there's probably two sides to that, as there are with everything. I think, I guess, like-minded people, can relate to like-minded people. They are able to converse and discuss, and therefore are aware of the structures and the systems and the language that allows you to have a successful application form that you then are able to be shortlisted, and then when you get to interview, you are recognized, you're able to speak the same language that makes sense, and often supported to enable you to get through interviews. There's something about people having the confidence to apply and feeling like they've got the ability to fit in those roles as well. So I think there's something about the community seeing the relevance for them in those roles. So I think it is a two-way process. I think there's something about us empowering the community to be able to apply and inspiring people to apply because as Clive has already said, there's so many job roles, but also us having the I suppose the capacity, the processes to be able to ensure that people are able to get through even the shortlisting process. And I know sort of as part of the BME network, there is a drive to make sure that there is a BAME member of staff on each interview process that happens, so that you are able to, I suppose, offer that representation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Adley. And question 3 is for Ursula. Why is there less funding for black community groups, which keeps people well in community rather than expensive inpatient care and costs? More must be done in community.
It's simple. All the funding goes to predominantly white organisations. The scraps that are left, they throw it to the BAME community, and they put so much red tape in and so much strings attached. By the time we get through it, we just think, you know what, this ain't worth it, can't be bothered, can't be asked to do this. The funding that is out there needs to be given to the black community, not just the scraps left at the bottom of the barrel. The large commissions need to be given to the black community, because we know best how to fix ourselves. We know best where the money needs to be spent. So that is the issue right now in terms of the funding. The people who are handing out the funding are predominantly white. They don't understand the black community. They don't know us. They're not a part of our community. So they don't know how to give us funding that works for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Question, are we going to question 5? Yeah. Okay, so we've got a question for Saika. We'll just rotate Saika and Adelaide. Hello again, Saika, welcome back. Hello. As a young black person, how can I be taken seriously when going to predominantly white general practitioners, be taken seriously when talking about my mental health?
Okay. I think there is a challenge there, but the good news is you don't have to go via your GP to seek help always. So if you're 18 plus, you can access the IAP service in Sheffield. You can go online, you can self-refer. As I explained earlier on, there's different therapies you can access, so you don't need to go via your GP. And if you're between 15 and 25, there's DOOR 43. And if you look at Sheffield Flourish's mental health guide, there's details in there, so you don't need to go via your GP. And I was supposed to sort of round it up, so I just want to say thank you to everybody for tonight, a fantastic production team, and you all, and Ursula for opening her doors for us, and we look forward to working with you further.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. All of us as well do. A final question for Peter. How can we take down this persona of black people being overdramatic or not being taken seriously when they try to indicate they may be suffering with mental health issues?
Wow. That's a really good question.
It's a big question, but just try to give us a brief.
Yeah, I'll try and give a brief. I think being able I think what's been really positive actually is that if you go to things like social media, so I'm thinking about things like Twitter and Facebook, and there's lots of blogs out there, people have become really good at articulating their experience. So I think look into those sources, or look into people who have been able to put it into words, and then being able to connect with that is a good start, because I think sometimes the problem is not having the language or not having the words to put what we're feeling and what we're experiencing in a way that people can understand. So I would start there. I think there's a book called, I can't remember what it's called, but what I'll do is I'll speak to the organisers and see if I can add it to the list of The Colour of Madness, that's what it's called, The Colour of Madness. So if you look that up on Amazon, it's an anthology of people who have made poetry, short stories that describes their experience. There's lots of things like that out there.
Thank you so much, Peter. And also thank you for sticking around. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Everyone that's come in, all of our guest speakers and our co-hosts and our lovely production team. Sheffield Health and Social Care NHS Trust are in the process of coordinating a number of strategic plans for developing their services going forward. Inclusions and race equity are an important part of this, and the key message that have come out of this event will help to inform these plans. We would really appreciate any further feedback, either about the event or black engagement in mental health services. Please do fill out the Survey Money, blackmentalhealth.live/feedback. The recording of this event will be available for people to access. We'll make sure that we put in the start time of the key themes in the video descriptions so you can jump to anything that may be useful. Please share this link far and wide with friends and family and all over social media so that it can reach as many people as possible, particularly people who are really in need of this type of information. We'll also try and respond to all the questions that we didn't get a chance to respond to. So continue to keep your eye on the chat link at #BMHlive. Here's the link to the Sheffield Mental Health Guide if you are looking for help with your mental health. Which just leaves me to thank all of our amazing guest speakers. You've all been amazing. Ursula, Adelaide, Psych, Peter, and Clive. Thank you all so much. And finally, thank you for your help in helping me host this whole event.
Welcome.
And your valuable input has really been so useful,
Nathan.
and it's going to reach an extended crowd beyond the barriers of our studio.
We hope so.
Yeah, we hope so as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you for hosting it. You did all right.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you guys for watching as well, for tuning in at home. And hopefully we'll see you at some point.
At the next one.
The next one.
Yes.
Yeah. Have a good evening, guys.